Alrighty, I've got to admit, first and foremost, I'm reading this comment section. You guys are fucking hilarious, okay? Actually, you know, it's probably not a good idea to curse at the beginning of a live stream because YouTube's going to immediately demonetize me. But, you know, it is what it is. Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to our Week 13 live stream for the 2024 fantasy football season. Now we are in Week 13 after the conclusion of the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. A very eventful game for those of us who had a Lamar Jackson, a Mark Andrews, a Derrick Henry, I guess. Again, you know, I already see people in the chat talking about Derrick Henry's touchdown being stolen, obviously being called back because of the holding penalty. The next play, of course, we have Lamar Jackson rushing it in. But, you know, via the overall play that we had via Underdog, the vulture protection has us covered. So we're not really worried about that. But either way, over the course of the next hour plus, we're talking all things fantasy football. In regards to Week 13, of course, we have 3 games this upcoming Thursday. We have one on Friday, and we, of course, have the Sunday slate. But over the course of today's live stream, whether we are talking about potential pickups for Week 13 in terms of waiver wire, Week 14, because, again, there's a 16 by apocalypse up ahead. Many of us are in need of, you know, not only trying to win this week and potentially win out by capturing a victory in Week 14. If your bye weeks obviously are already past you and you're preparing for the fantasy playoffs because you've already secured a position, even better, then we'll go ahead and look towards weeks 15 and beyond. But outside of that, let's get into answering questions, shall we? So the first super was sent in. Again, if you guys are going to send in a question, whether it's in the live chat or super chat, make sure you include your scoring format. That is greatly appreciated, and it goes a long way in terms of helping me help you, because it's just a quicker rotation of being able to answer that question that I know the full context of your situation. Thank you. All right, 10 fam starts out the day, says, won the week matchup thanks to your advice. I picked up Tua instead of playing Geno. Thank you. In a half PPR, by the way, Pickens or Evans this week. If we're going to talk about Pickens, they play against Cincinnati and or Evans versus Carolina. I'm probably going to lean in the direction. Well, look, I honestly think both teams are going to find success offensively. If you're playing in a half PPR, I'm more inclined. I want to say Evans is what I would do at the moment. Are him and Pickens going to be separated by very much in terms of rankings? Absolutely not. I honestly will not be surprised by Friday in terms of that video if they're back-to-back ranked. As of right now, I'd lean towards Evans in a half PPR. If it was a full PPR, I'd tell you to play Pickens. That's how close it is. It's just a matter of the volume of receptions and the potential touchdown upside, which honestly, if we account for the Pickens target that he had at the end of that game on Thursday night of last week in the snow globe game, if it wasn't for the snow, Pickens burnt his defender and was easily going to score a touchdown. He just couldn't locate the ball because he couldn't see. All right, thank you, Tan. Appreciate it. Moving on to a question from Lou. Lou says, in a PPR, I'm 8-4. Nix, Mixon, Bijan, Nakua, AJ Brown, Jonnu, Sutton. Okay, got a pretty good looking team here. We have more Najee Harris, Marvin Harrison, Murray, Kincaid. Was offered Hill for more? Yes or no? Yeah, I'll take Tyreek Hill rest of the season. I don't have an issue with that at all. I mean, again, look, Jonnu Smith has played incredibly well. The fact that we have seen Devon Achane leading all running backs in the National Football League thus far this season in terms of receiving touchdowns, obviously, those are going to be anomalous situations in which only those two are feasting while, you know, there's a Jalen Waddle resurgence game. Going forward, I do believe that Tyreek Hill will be more valuable, though. If you want to keep more because you like the momentum of what you've seen as of late in terms of his usage change since the offensive coordinator change, I don't have an issue with it, but personally, I do prefer Hill going forward. Thank you. Moving on to God's Gang, who sends in a question. Says, drop ETN for Edwards. Is it silly? Is it just, yeah, I mean, at this point, you kind of have to, especially if you have J.K. Dobbins. If you have J.K. Dobbins on roster, we don't know the extent of that injury, but obviously we know that it wasn't, comfortable for him to potentially return to the matchup. Therefore, I would say if you are going to potentially be starting J.K. Dobbins within your lineup and you need to have an option to pivot from him, Edwards would be that. You pick him up. Now, obviously, like we have witnessed tonight and we've witnessed all season long, Edwards is not a 3-down back within this offense by any means, right? So if he's going to be productive, he's only going to be productive via the running game. So if I look at like J.K. Dobbins' overall rushing attempts over the course of the season, that's pretty much all he's going to be accounted for in the absence of Dobbins. So over the course of this season, you know, assuming we're just talking about games across the board, he's pretty much going to get himself maybe 13, 14 rushing attempts. If he scores a rushing touchdown, he's a great play. Otherwise, he's very much so a half PPR running back that is very reliant on touchdowns. Thank you. All right, let's get into live chat. Let's see what you guys have to say here. All right, scrolling down, Clarence O says, started 1-3, now I'm 7-5. Yeah, listen, I would say that probably majority of us started out not doing well because the beginning of the season was a disaster and a toss-up. Because really the first 2-3 weeks there, were like the fourth and fifth preseason games. We talked about it earlier in week one, right? Or week one was the lowest scoring week in like the last 20 years of NFL history. So, the passing touchdown, the passing yardage numbers were all-time lows for like 20 years. So starting out slow wasn't a big deal. Obviously, your team found success as of late. So I'm glad to hear that, Clarence. Anonymous says, broke my 4-game skid tonight. I'm thinking I'm back in fifth. Next week is huge for me. Yeah, next week is going to be great, especially considering, again, everybody's off their bye weeks. But again, if you guys are still trying to win out in order to make the playoffs, ensure that you are prepared for week 14 because the bye-apocalypse is going to hit hard. If you've gone ahead and constructed your roster in a way in which you have traded out the players that are going on their upcoming buys and you have avoided that, beautiful. You've set yourself up for success in that circumstance. But if you do and are going to face the bye-apocalypse, of course, be sure to hit the waivers in order to accommodate for that a week early, because otherwise this time next week, you probably won't have very many options to hit the road and try to pick up and play with. Ando says, is it time to bench Tyreek Hill in a half PPR? I don't think so. My wide receivers are Tyreek Hill, Puka Nacua, Evans, and Drake London. Okay, in that case, I would say that there's a conversation to be had, because Puka Nacua at this point is an auto start every single week, considering he has no bye weeks ahead. I mean, none of your receivers have a bye week up ahead, but considering that circumstance with Drake London, Evans, I would say that there's a conversation to be had that Puka Nacua and Drake London are your starting wide receivers every week henceforth for the remainder of the season. Now, as to what you do with your flex position, very much so dependent on what you have at running back. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a conversation to be had there for sure, Ando. All right, let's see here. Frosty says, as a Packers fan and his fantasy manager, I've fallen madly in love with Josh Jacobs. Yeah, Josh Jacobs is great. I mean, obviously, they're benefiting from the fact that, they throw out a pass to Tucker Kraft. He literally jumps, hurdles someone, and then reaches out for the 1 yard line and gets tackled and down there. Very easily could have been a Tucker Kraft touchdown. The next play, immediately, boom, we have a Josh Jacobs touchdown. Those are the beauties of circumstances in which sometimes it hurts you for fantasy and sometimes it helps you. We'll take it though. Let's see here. Damien sends it a question. Thank you, Damien. Appreciate it. It says Tank Bigsby, Olave, or Jonathan Brooks. So I think it's very much so dependent on multiple factors, okay? So Jonathan Brooks, I'm not picking up out of those available options. Olave is 100% determined on his health and whether or not they even want him to come back and play. In the event in which he would come back and play, obviously I'd like to have him on my roster. But again, I'm not certain considering he has sustained already 2 concussions this year, and it may not be a great idea from the organization standpoint to send him out and force him to play, unfortunately. So that one I'm a little bit sketched out about. As for Tank Bigsby, I think he should be rostered. You look at that upcoming schedule for Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence potentially returning, them not shutting him down for the remainder of the season. That's very promising to hear. And Tank Bigsby, hopefully healthy, would be a potential pickup and play, especially if you need help for a Week 14 bye or potentially need running back depth because you've lost some talent because of injury over the course of the last couple weeks here, and maybe he can fill in for Weeks 14 and beyond. So as of right now, I prefer Tank Bigsby, considering the uncertainty of Olave. Thomas Dabney says, let's see the slips so I can catch the football. See the slips for what? Like this week? Let's see here. Let me go to Underdog. So in terms of today's plays, I think everything kind of was fine. We got saved by the vulture protection, right? Let's see here. If we go to live, we go to Pick'em. Yeah, so like if we, let me transition real quick. So if we travel on over to Underdog, if I go to screen capture, in terms of the plays for today, right? These were the 2 plays I suggested. So this one hit. Disley barely went over his receptions, and so did Zay Flowers. And then this one will eventually hit because, again, Derrick Henry didn't score a rushing touchdown, but Lamar Jackson did. And based on how the vulture protection works, and you know that a player is vulture protected because of the little vulture symbols around them, because he didn't score a rushing touchdown, but Lamar did, which is it's basically any player who's not a running back who also scores a touchdown in that game, protects it to where the money comes back to us. Now, in regards to some of these other plays, I need a couple of these other NBA plays to hit. This one went well for me earlier today. This one, I just need one more rebound from Draymond Green, and this one will go pretty well as well. So, I mean, again, I'm doing pretty well as of today in regards to picks. In terms of what else is left remaining. But yeah, in terms of putting in future plays for this upcoming Thursday, that'll be at a different time. At the moment, we'll just continue to focus on potentially answering questions going into Week 13. Thank you. All right, let's see here. We had a question that came in from Ibrahim, who says, did Jonathan Taylor lose all of his talent? No, the offensive line did. I'll keep it a stack. The offensive line definitely did not play well at all. So as of this current moment, it doesn't look very promising as an offense. everyone's going to point to, oh, it's Anthony Richardson who has made Jonathan Taylor bad. Now, listen, it's a combination of a multitude of different things. But as we continue, it is becoming more and more of a difficult prospect to trust starting a player of the caliber of Taylor. Even though he is a great talent and he's got a great offensive line, at times, he disappears and the game fades away from him. Peter says, I'm glad the Underdog McKinney 0.5 interception came through. Yeah, it did came through. Unfortunately, I paired it up with the Brian Robinson play. I mean, luckily, again, they rescue protected that, so I got my dollar back. But good call on that, Peter. Good call on that. Kamikaze says, which defense to target for Week 14? That's a great question. Let me go ahead and pull up Week 14 schedule, and I will tell you right now. So in regards to potentially Week 14, if we talk about it as a whole, we have... Yeah, look, as of right now, when I look at Week 14, New Orleans versus the Giants seems pretty appealing. The Eagles, if somehow, some way they're available against Carolina, is very appealing. I would say Buccaneers versus the Raiders. Seahawks or Cardinals versus each other again, very promising. And then that basically covers it. Maybe the Dolphins against the Jets if they're available as well. So there's just a couple options there. You could theoretically also run the Titans against the Jaguars, but again, I think that's a little bit more of a desperate situation play. Daniel Barnes sends in a question. Thank you, Daniel. Says, trade Jonnu plus Chubb for Connor. I have McBride. Yeah, I'm cool with that. I don't have an issue with that at all. Again, Jonnu Smith has been playing incredibly well as of late, and I'm glad to see it. Of course, he's continuing to develop within his career, and of course, that offense is continuing to highly utilize him. But in regards to Chubb, again, unless you're lining up on the 1 yard line, Chubb's not breaking out any runs for touchdowns. Connor is obviously coming off of a very lackluster performance, but really it's just a buy low at this point in comparison to what he has ahead of him. So yeah, I'd be willing to make that trade for the future, assuming, again, you are preparing for the fantasy playoffs there, Daniel. Thank you. Logan Fisher says, trade Tyrone Tracy for Devontae Smith in a full PPR. I have Kyler, Aaron Jones, Achan, J-Jet, Debo, BTJ, Aaron, was that Andrews? We have Coop. I mean, at this point, trading away Tyrone Tracy, I mean, yeah, you could. You don't need him. You have Aaron Jones, Achan, but in terms of potential for depth, if anybody was to get injured, that would be the only concern. Your next backup in the conversation would be Dowdle, which I don't really trust outright. If it wasn't for the fact that, of course, Devin Singletary stole the goal line rushing attempt that stole 6 points from Tyrone Tracy's baseline of production, we would have had ourselves a little bit of a more promising week. Do I believe that Devontae Smith will be healthy and or productive going forward? Time will tell. Again, he's dealing with a hamstring issue that has kind of plagued him for quite a while. But even prior to him getting injured, he hasn't seen himself a consistent target share within the offense, which makes him a lesser potential desire for me, especially going forward here into the fantasy playoffs, especially considering that running game is going to be hyper-focused on making sure that, Barkley can average over 100 yards per game rest of the season in order to eclipse 2,000. The priority is going to be on, the other options within the offense in comparison. So I don't feel that you have to make the trade. I think you have enough at wide receiver to be able to continue on. But if you want to, you certainly can. You just got to be willing to understand that if the injuries hit for, Achan and or Aaron Jones, you're cooked. Let's see here. Crispy sends in a question. Thank you, Crispy. Says, Week 13, Stroud, Bucky, Walker, St. Brown, Wilson, Jonnu, Jennings, Broncos defense, kickers Moody, benches JSN, Caleb, Etienne, Cooper, Stevenson, Laporta. What do you think? Okay, so there's multiple thoughts on the matter. Obviously, Bucky's a fantastic play. Walker's a solid play as well, taking on the Jets. As for St. Brown, that's an auto start. Garrett Wilson. Okay, so here's my only thought process. I would say that I'm willing to 100% play JSN over Wilson at the moment. And if Jennings does not have Purdy, then I'll play Wilson, or otherwise I'll play Jennings. Because really at this point, I don't know what to expect from the Jets offense as a whole. Very difficult to predict. So JSN, Jennings, and St. Brown should be your priority three. In the event in which Brock Purdy misses another week this week as they take on the Buffalo Bills, at that point you'd pivot from Jennings to Wilson as your flex. That's how I'm going to approach it as of this week, Crispy. Thank you. Jeremy Melendez sends in a question. Says, Waddle, Leggett, or Wan'Dale Robinson rest of the season? I mean, again, I think it's always been clearly Waddle. Obviously, sometimes he's going to get opportunity, sometimes he's not. And you're just going to have to live with the ebbs and flows of Jalen Waddle. That's it. But otherwise, we always know that he's associated with the best offense. He is the best receiver of the three. And when he goes off, he goes off. When he doesn't, I mean, again, he's just like any of these other wide receivers. They don't play well either. So really, you just have Waddle. All right, let's see here. CP sends it a question. It says, CeeDee Lamb is looking good with Cooper Rush, correct? What are your thoughts on him rest of the season? I mean, again, as long as the targets continue to be there, they've taken on some pretty solid. I mean, the matchups haven't been the most difficult. Like, he's not going up against the Eagles. When he takes on the Eagles up ahead, therein lies the overall situation and where we're going to have to really test his value. But upcoming for the Cowboys schedule, I don't think it's, like, taking on the Giants this week, then the Bengals, then the Panthers, then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The only quite literal issue is the Eagles matchup, which, if I'm not mistaken, is week 17. Yeah, it's week 17. So you can ride Lamb all the way into the fantasy championship. Start him every single week. Have no issue as long as his injury doesn't flare up. There's no concerns there. Expect him to continue to play well. I mean, again, he's an elite level player. It's just a matter of, can the quarterback continue to get him opportunity? Because that's all that matters. Opportunity leads to success, as we all know. Let's see here. Flo says, so far, the league winner award is slowly favoring Cortland Sutton. Straight up, yeah, dude, guy is a machine. Yeah, after the goose egg against the Saints on that Thursday night game, Flo, you're not wrong. He has been, I mean, dude, you know what it is, though? It's not even a matter of, like, Cortland Sutton is great. It's that who would have thought that Bo Nix was going to be this good year one? Like, Bo Nix has been fantastic for fantasy purposes, for the purposes of elevating his options around him. Obviously, they don't have a running game yet. Let, Sean Payton have an off season here, whether it's via, signing someone or drafting someone, they're going to bring in a talent. I can assure you that. They got a great offensive line thus far. They got a lot of talent there. Defense has looked great. Vance Joseph has really turned that thing around. Their secondary, obviously, is one of the best in the leagues. But yeah, who would have thought that Bo Nix would play as well as he has? I mean, that is the key. Because even with, Russell Wilson last year, Cortland Sutton was good. So we thought, okay, he's got the talent. It's just a matter of, is the quarterback going to be good enough? And certainly it checks all the boxes to get the job done. And then some. Louis says, should I drop Tillman for Keenan Allen that was dropped? I mean, yeah, again, if you're going to need someone to play this week, and Tillman was going to be the guy to fill in, expect Tillman to miss because of the concussion protocol. So if you were going to need someone to roll out this week, Keenan Allen on Thursday against the not against the Miami Dolphins. Against the Detroit Lions on Thursday morning, should be a pretty solid option there. Again, do not forget there are 3 games this upcoming Thursday, guys. I will be live streaming starting at, I'm going to say 7 a.m., 6:30 or 7 a.m. It's either going to be a 2.5 hour or 3 hour live stream starting on Thursday morning prior to the kickoff of the first game between the Lions and the Bears. We'll be answering questions like it's a Sunday morning on Thursday morning, though. Then additionally, on Friday of this week, prior to the Raiders taking on the Chiefs on Black Friday, I'll also be live answering questions before that. Then, of course, we'll also live stream on Saturday, and then once again, normal Sunday live stream as we typically do. So just keep that in mind, guys. Outside of that, again, the rest of the scheduling in terms of tomorrow, running back, wide receiver Wednesday should be good to go. There won't be a quarterback or tight end video, mainly because, again, Thursday is, I got to wake up pronto and have everything ready to go on screen. So the rankings will be available there for those of you guys who are looking for that. Otherwise, you can swing on by on Sunday morning as well. We'll have rankings available there. Livewire says, nah, Flo, the league winner is not Sutton, it's Barkley. I think it's just dependent on, like, the value, right? Because, like, Barkley was a late first-round pick. So if we want to talk about, like, who's been more impactful in terms of fantasy success, like, the argument could even be made that it's not even Barkley and that Derrick Henry, based on where he was drafted, is actually more valuable. Because in terms of, like, yes, production overall, Derrick Henry, in comparison to Saquon Barkley, in terms of fantasy point per game averages, like, the separation of value there, where you were able to get Derrick Henry sometimes in the back end of the second, early third round, like, maybe that's, you know what I mean? Like, there's a conversation or argument for everything. The argument could also be made for Alvin Kamara as to what he has done compared to where he was being drafted. There's a lot of players that have played beyond their means. And the funny thing is, the 3 players that I just mentioned, Barkley, Kamara, and Henry, are all older running backs. This whole, like, idea, or the whole, like, kind of strategy of, we need to draft younger running backs. When they get older, they fall off the cliff. I mean, Barkley, Henry, Kamara, Aaron Jones, they are proving the system wrong. That the running back longevity for these elite level players, I mean, it's continuing and it's not slowing down. James Conner's continued to prove it this season. It's been great to see. I love it. Damien sends in a question in the live chat, says, rank my tight end. I have to drop 2, Hill, Disley, Jonnu, and Ferguson. Yeah, as of right now, if I'm keeping 2 of them for the remainder of the season, I'm keeping Taysom Hill and I'm keeping Jonnu Smith. Those are the 2 that I want rest of the season there, Damien. Thank you. All right, we move on to a question from Lamosity, who says, absolute miracle this week. Needed 63 points out of Jacobs and Saquon and got it. Yeah, Saquon is he's Santa Claus. He's bringing home early presents in the month of November. Yeah, Saquon's been ridiculous. It is what it is. I mean, again, we've talked about it this season. There's two different Saquons. There's the Saquon who scores touchdowns, and there's a Saquon who doesn't. When he scores touchdowns, he's averaging 32 points per game this season. In games in which he does not score touchdowns, he's averaging 10 points per game. Let's just hope he continues to score touchdowns. Again, do not forget, he has the easiest strength of schedule within the fantasy playoffs at the running back position. So if you've got Saquon and you're getting into week 15 and beyond, expect yourself to have have a pretty good advantage upon your league mates there. Thomas Dabney sends in a question, says, scared Aaron Rodgers gets benched rest of season. What are your thoughts on Garrett? Is Tyrod solid? Tyrod Taylor's a solid quarterback. I don't have an issue with him at all. I think Tyrod Taylor can get the job done. As for what Garrett Wilson's overall potential for upside will be in the case of a Tyrod Taylor-led offense, obviously it's going to be lessened. I mean, the offense is already in shambles with Aaron Rodgers under center, and even though he has played like a lesser version of himself, he's still Aaron Rodgers. He's still got the right brain intact. Maybe physically he's not the same, but I don't think that it gets any better with Tyrod there. So at the moment, I'm thinking to myself, specifically this week, let's just be careful. I mean, again, the last couple performances of the Jets offense has not been promising enough to where I have any sort of, I mean, really in the second half, they're solid. In the first half, they're just a complete shit show. So if I'm only getting 2 quarters of solid play from my receivers, what's the point of even rolling them out there when I can get a full solid 4 quarters of a George Pickens or a Mike Evans or something like that exchange? Let's see here. What do we have? And then your final question there was keep Broncos defense this week. Broncos, if I'm not mistaken, week 13, they play against Cleveland. Yeah, I'm playing them this week. Absolutely. Yeah, I have no issue keeping them. CP sends in a follow-up question. Thank you, CPs. Says in a 10-team PPR, I have Jalen Hurts, Achane, Jacobs, CD, Cup, Kittle, and Swift. Okay. Waddle and Devontae Smith also. Trade deadline just passed in my league. Okay. Yeah, you don't need to make any trades, brother. You're solid for the rest of the season. So do you think my roster? Yeah, you're fantastic. You're 9-3. Again, you have Jalen Hurts, Achane, Jacobs, CD, Cup, Kittle. They should just give you the I don't know what you guys do. Do you have like a prize pool? Do you guys have a title belt? Do you guys have a crown that you guys give someone who wins a championship? I mean, again, you got to play the games to see what happens, but I think you're in a pretty good position to bring home a championship this year, CPs, based on that roster. Principal Meyer says old receivers suck, but not old running backs. Yeah, it's funny that that's the case because that typically was never the case. You go back to last season, if we're talking about the old wide receivers, players like Keenan Allen, Adam Thielen, Cooper Kupp, when they're active and ready to go, despite the fact that they were, the year of 31 or up in terms of their age, they were still relevant. But now this year, it's kind of flipped. We're getting those, 29 to 30-year-old running back cooking. Let's see here. Saul Martinez says, my Henry in Underdog was just marked red. Did Vulture not apply correctly? Yeah, don't worry about that. Listen, I would assume that the likelihood is that it's going to... Why would it go red? Mine is red too. Let me see this really quickly. So let me read this quote unquote Vulture protection just so that we can see this. So it says rules. If you select a player that is designated running back list to score a rushing touchdown or receiving touchdown in your entry, you will receive Vulture protection. If your selected player gets vultured, your entry will be rescued and you'll be given a promo that'll appear in the lobby. Limit of 1 promo. The only applies if you choose higher than a player. Yep, okay. Vulture protection is only eligible for pregame selections. Okay. Vulture protection will be activated based on how many times the running back is vultured and how many rushing touchdowns they score. For example, if Saquon Barkley is vultured once, but ends up scoring rushing touch. Okay. Barkley, selection of the higher. Vulture protection also only applies in entries that use Pick'em Flex. For example, if you have pick 5 entry where 3 selections are graded as a win and 1 is selected as a loss, final selection. Okay, yeah, I don't see why it's not eligible. That's the question. Rushing touchdown must be from the opposing 10-yard line or closer. How long was the rushing touchdown for Lamar Jackson tonight? All right, let's see here. I'm going to find it right now. If it was an 11-yard rushing touchdown, then we get cooked. Let's see here. If I go to the stats, tonight's game, if I go to touchdowns, Lamar Jackson, 10-yard rushing touchdown. Again, it should be fine. I guarantee you, if you go to Twitter right now, people are burning them down at the stake, and they'll fix it. There's no reason they wouldn't fix it. Because if they don't, I'm going to get after them. All right, anyway, continuing on, we had a question that came in from Corey Miller. Thank you, Corey. Questions in the comments. Thank you for all the help. Been rolling because of you and the live streams. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, Corey. I appreciate the kind words. All right, Corey, let's see here. So Corey says, 12-team PPR. 8-4 currently, secured a playoff spot. I have Stroud, Connor, Aaron Jones, Amon-Ra, London, Jamar Chase, Kittle. I mean, dude. Kyrie Fairbairn. You have Akers, Benson, Abdullah, Vele, Bateman, Arizona defense, playoffs. Okay. How confident are you with this team? I mean, really, at this point, Stroud is the only issue that I have. Of course. I think I've mentioned this before to you, Corey. That is the only issue. Otherwise, Connor, Aaron Jones, Amon-Ra, London, Jamar Chase, Kittle are as good as it gets. If you can somehow get a better quarterback than Stroud, fantastic. If not, then let's just hope that the rest of the team can carry him and he's not going to be an issue for you in the upcoming future. Otherwise, I'm very confident with it. Thank you, Corey. Let's see. We had a comment from Ibrahim sent in. Says, Jacobs top 5. I mean, look, Jacobs has a top... Okay, so let's just put it this way. He has an incredible fantasy playoff schedule. We talked about it weeks ago, back in week 11, when we talked about the rest of the season strength schedule. From weeks 15 through 17, he's got a top 5 running back schedule. So in itself, that is incredible. Now that he's able to accomplish what he is prior to even the advantageous matchups, which again, if we talk about the Packers games ahead, specifically, weeks 15 through 17 consist of the Seattle Seahawks cannot stop the run. I can assure you this. The New Orleans Saints cannot stop the run. And then you have week 17 against the Minnesota Vikings, which is a difficult matchup. But, I mean, again, if you get to week 17, that's all that matters. Really, you'll at least be in the conversation of the dance. All right, Arjun sends in a question. Says, hey, brother, quick question. I'm currently 5-7. I have Garrett Wilson, CeeDee Lamb, Marvin Harrison, Smitty. My running backs are Tracy and Wilson. Tracy and Wilson. Okay, interesting. I have 2 trades on the table. White for Smith or Addison and Bucky for Garrett Wilson. Interesting. Okay, so there's many ways that we can go about this. Let's see here. So if we pull up... Okay. So... Okay, so my immediate question is... So are you... Okay, so... If I'm getting this straight, Arjun, if Tracy and Wilson are your starting RBs, right? That means that Emmanuel Wilson is one of your starting RBs. So in that case, yes, we absolutely need to be making a trade for a running back. Whether you're going after Rachaad White and or Bucky Irving, I think either way, let me see here, Wilson, CD, Marvin, Smitty. I think it's probably, I mean, if I'm in your position, I'm trading for Bucky Irving. Again, this was something that I've been on for the last 3 weeks now. I've said it from the rooftops for the last 3 weeks here. Absolutely, without a doubt, I'm on the Bucky Irving train. He obviously performed well this most recent week, and hopefully he'll continue to do so. So at the moment, yeah, I'd go for that Bucky side. Thank you. All right, Boy Jay sends in a question. Says, should I drop Cedric Tillman and Amir Abdullah for Taysom Hill and Tank Bigsby? Yes. If you're looking for the long term, absolutely. Again, Abdullah is only short term because they play on Friday, and there's a chance that Alexander Madison and Zamir White both miss. Also, I'm dropping Brandon Allen for the Cardinals defense. Yeah, sounds good to me. Boy Jay, I would say that making those moves are the proper approach as of right now for the long term. Saul Martinez says, oh, I think because I paired it with Promo Rescue, maybe. I don't think that would be the reason as to why it would. Again, I'm going to assume because it pretty much follows all the rules as to why it would be rescued because of the vulture protection. I'm going to assume that it gets protected, like if it gets saved. If it doesn't, then I will send in an email tomorrow in order to clarify as to why it didn't get saved. Maybe I have to reread the overall instructions as to what it entails. Maybe because, it doesn't make sense. Maybe there's a rule because like Justice Hill scored a touchdown. It doesn't get saved. I don't know. I'd have to go and look into it. Let's see here. We move on to a question from Death to Ming, who says, where do we rank Gus the Bus if JK is out? I have no clue. Again, I haven't even started my running back rankings yet. I've been collecting data as of watching that game on one monitor and collecting data on the other. As of, let's say, for example, going into this week's matchup, I would say he's definitely an RB3 because he doesn't have receiving upside. And they take on Kansas City, which again is a top-tier run-stopping matchup. Unless he scores a touchdown, he's not scoring 10 fantasy points. So again, he's going to be a low-end RB3 in my mind as of right now. Thank you. So basically, like, you'd only pick him up if, again, you want to start the number 31 overall ranked running back for the week. Because, again, no teams are on bye. He may be even lower. He may be number 33. We'll have to wait and see. Angel Montero sends in a question. Says, hey, Andrew, Andrew, two-part, any changes? Question mark. 12-man full PPR. We have Allen, Darnold, Achane, JT, Brian Robinson Jr. We have Chase Brown. We have Brooks. We have St. Brown. We have Wilson, Evans, Debo, Olave, Kittle, Hawkinson, and Moody. I mean, look, the only change that I would theoretically advance on potentially making is changing Moody if, in fact, there's no Brock Purdy this week. I'm surprised that you played Moody last week in the event in which he was absent, because, again, without Purdy, that offense is not going to be able to be as constructive as they typically are, or, successful. But outside of that, I'm not changing anything. I think you're looking good across the board. Brian Robinson Jr.'s most recent injury is obviously concerning, but as long as you get him back for the fantasy playoffs, you'll be able to sustain with Achane, JT, and Chase Brown until he returns. But otherwise, no, there's no needs to make any moves there, Angel. You got a pretty solid squad. And then your next question was, also, should I pick up Bigsby over Brooks? Yeah, I would. I'd pick up Bigsby over Brooks. Absolutely. Thank you. All right, moving on to Denon, who sends in a question. Thank you, Denon. Let's see where you're at in the live chat, Denon. Denon, where art thou? Denon says, should I pick up Taysom Hill and drop Chubb, even though I have Cade Otton and Jonnu Smith? I would drop Cade Otton for Taysom Hill at this point, because the way that Jonnu Smith has played as of late, the total target opportunity, the red zone utilization, it is so much of a more significantly potent position, especially if you're playing in like a half PPR standard league. Jonnu Smith, Taysom Hill will be like two of the most solidified tight ends that I could possibly imagine for the remainder of the season, in comparison to Cade Otton, who's very much so very much so target dependent. If the targets aren't going in his direction because they're blowing out teams, they're not going to throw the ball 30 to 40 times a game going forward, the alternatives would be the preferred. So I wouldn't drop Chubb as of there. I would rather just, drop one of the tight ends and pick up, Taysom Hill in that overall circumstance. Thank you. Dr. Dab sends in a question. Says, you helped me from 10th to 2nd place. Look in the chat. Oh, geez. 10th to 2nd. I mean, look, in my own, let me just put this into perspective, okay? There have been leagues this season that I was in that earlier this season, I was in last place. I was literally 0-3 in one league. I've completely turned it around. The beginning of the season is irrelevant, guys. If you actually drafted a good team, if you can actually avoid injuries, I mean, again, everything should course itself through and, eventually find success. But yeah, there are some situations in which you drafted the wrong players, you got injured, and then you're screwed. You're last place the whole season. Let's see your Dr. Dabs. Where is your team in the chat? Let's go find it. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, Dr. Dabs. Let's see here. Dr. Dabs says, I started 0-4. Okay, that's ridiculous. 0-4 is a pretty rough start, man. Rostered, it says, besides 5 players, it says Gibbs, Brian Robinson, T. Higgins, Sam Laporta, Stephon Diggs, Terrace ACL, picked up Baker, Rashad White. So basically you drafted 5 players. The rest of it was all waiver wire pickups, which was Baker, Rashad White, Otton, Irving, Sutton, Downs. Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand a point where probably somebody dropped Rashad White earlier in the year. Nobody had drafted Baker or Cade Otton. Cortland Sutton was probably dropped earlier this season. Josh Downs was probably not drafted. Mooney probably not drafted. Seibert was not drafted. Yeah, I mean, look, that's just the waiver wire episode coming in clutch for you there. Again, if you guys haven't checked out the waiver wire episode for earlier today, week 13, it is available. I mentioned players for not only week 13, but also in preparation for week 14, for those of you who are dealing with an upcoming bipocalypse on hand. Thank you. All right, Bruce Cowdery sends in a question. Thank you, Bruce. Says, in a full PPR rank and thoughts on Noah, Brown, Westbrook, Ikine, and or Pittman. Look, if we're talking about this week as to who I am starting, Michael Pittman Jr. is number 1 of the group, especially with Josh Downs sustaining an injury. As long as Michael Pittman Jr. is ready to go this week, he is the priority number 1. Ikine would be number 2, and Noah Brown will be number 3. Thank you. Josh Holt sends in a question, says questions in the chat. I see it, Josh. Thank you. Josh says, I'm 5-7, and I need to win in the last 2 games. Week 13 roster consists of full PPR Tua, Bijan, Kenneth Walker, Higgins, BTJ in the flex. We have JT Otton, okay. We have Chiefs defense, Fairbairn. My bench consists of Stroud, which, yes, I do prefer Tua there. You have Warren, Debo, Devontae Adams, Waddle, Laporta. Okay, so as we go into the week, as it progresses, if, in fact, Brock Purdy is going to play, I'd like to play Debo there within your flex position over Otton and or JT, either of the two, especially in a PPR format. I'd also probably be looking in the direction of... I'd also be very interested in, let's see here. Do I want to play? Okay, the answer, okay, so I want to play JT. I'm going to play JT. Kate Otten, though, it probably gets replaced by Deebo Samuel. If not Deebo, it's getting replaced by Waddle, at very least there. If not that, I'm probably replacing with Jalen Warren, at very least. But yeah, as of right now, that's kind of the direction I'm leaning in regarding your team. Otherwise, the rest of it is solid and ready to go. In the event in which you don't have Trevor Lawrence active and BTJ's playing this week against the Titans, I'd also maybe venture to say it may be it might be also let's see here. Oh, they play the Texans this week. Even with Mac Jones there, I'd be okay with that. Never mind, you're good. So really, it's just the Otten play and whether we switch to Deebo. Thank you. God's Gang sends in a question, says, are we starting up Pacheco if he plays on Friday? I don't think he's going to play. I think the reason why they didn't have him activated for last week is because they're not trying to make any quick moves. They're trying to kind of slowly ease him in and get him fully ready to go. So at the moment, I'm probably going to lean in the direction of assuming that Kareem Hunt is going to start this Friday. In the event in which Pacheco is active, though, and he's, gets a full practice by some point this week, then I'd say, yeah, let's fire him up. But I don't even think he's going to be active for this week because they don't really need him either way to beat the Raiders. YG sends in a question, says Deebo and Pittman for JMO. No, absolutely not. I'm not trading that for JMO just alone. No, I'm good. Thank you. Lamosity sends in a question, says questions in the chat. Lamosity, didn't you ask one earlier? Says in a 10-team half PPR, we have Mahomes, Love, Saquon, Jacobs, dude, these running backs, Stevenson, Chase, Hill, Harrison, Judy, Tillman, Thielen, Otten, Laporta, Fairbairn. Texans defense 8-4. Any recommendations? We have Kraft, Ertz, Bateman, Odunze, and Waddle available. In terms of recommendations that I would make, you're 8-4. So that pretty much means you're most likely going to make the playoffs in a 10-team league. In the event in which you are going to be preparing for the upcoming playoff stint, I'm just kind of looking at matchups. And if I'm you, I'm kind of pre-aligning what your lineup's going to look like in those instances. If you find that one of your tight ends in week 15, for example, don't have great matchups and there's somebody on the waivers that it has a advantageous one up ahead, then we probably look to potentially pivot in that circumstance. So, for example, you have Tampa Bay versus the Chargers, which again, Mark Andrews played relatively well tonight, but outside of a touchdown, Kate Otten would be a difficult play in that sequence. But honestly, should be more of a competitive game. Hopefully, more Baker Mayfield passing. So you could, leave it at that. You could potentially try to play Laporta against the Bills. Don't love that. But Green Bay has the Seattle Seahawks, which isn't a bad tight end matchup. Again, there are ways to go about it, but I think you should just begin to start preparing for the fantasy playoffs at an 8-4 record, specifically with defense and maybe just some of those contingent fringe players that are matchup based. Otherwise, your primary pillars of running back and receiver are so strong that you're not moving them. You're leaving them as such. Saquon and Jacobs, Mahomes and Loves can be a matchup proof thing at this point based on how well they've played. So at the moment, really, I'm just looking towards tight end and defense. All right. Amar Gomez sends in a question. Thank you. It says full PPR. Who would you recommend to replace J.K. Dobbins next week if he doesn't go? So my primary recommendation would be just his handcuff immediately, which is Gus Edwards. In the event in which, again, you just want a 1-week play, if you ask me, hey, Andrew, listen, would you rather start Jeremy McNichols against the Tennessee Titans or Gus Edwards this upcoming week against the Cleveland Browns? No, they don't play the Cleveland Browns. Sorry. That's the Broncos that play the Cleveland Browns. They play the Falcons this week. So if you're asking me, would I rather play Gus Edwards versus the Falcons or, for example, Jeremy McNichols versus the Tennessee Titans? I'm not even joking. I'd rather play Jeremy McNichols. So if we're talking about a 1-week play, that's the way I go about it. If we're talking about long-term, if I'd rather have, for example, Tyjae Spears, Tank Bigsby, or Gus Edwards in the long-term overall effect, I'd probably pick Gus Edwards there. Because if this J.K. Dobbins injury, again, which we'll get more clarity on tomorrow, if it's more significant and he's going to miss a lot of time, eventually, at that point, there are going to be matchups and instances in which Gus Edwards is going to have his 2 touchdown games. He's going to have a huge breakoff run. He has been relevant in the receiving game in the past within the Ravens offense. They just have to get him more implemented within that overall situation, and he could still be solid in that situation. So for right now, yeah, that would be the way that I go about it. All right, let's see here. Jimmy sends in a super chat, says, nice call on Bucky, Andrew. Is he a must start now? Yeah, I mean, look, he's always been a must start. I mean, okay, no. Let me take this back. Understand that Bucky Irving, what he has accomplished over the last 6 weeks, is it's not a surprise that he played well, right? Because look at his last 6 performances in a half PPR. 17.5, 15.2, 11.9, 4.9, 16.2, and most recently against the Giants, 24.1. Did he have his most impactful performance as of yet? Absolutely. But in the same vein, it was a great matchup in which they weren't in a negative game script. The most recent matchups have been against San Francisco, Kansas City, Baltimore. Like, those are elite teams. So now that he takes on New York Giants, Carolina, Las Vegas, Los Angeles Chargers, Dallas, Carolina, Bucky Irving is the championship running back. I've told you guys, I wanted Bucky Irving and James Conner for the fantasy playoffs. Those are the more affordable backs because, Josh Jacobs was more out of reach because of his overall standing. But yeah, if you traded for him and you did yourself the favor, it's going to be paying dividends going forward here. Let's see here. Ando says in a half PPR, flex Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, or James Conner. For this week, am I playing James Conner against Minnesota or Mike Evans versus Carolina? I'm probably playing Mike Evans, to be totally honest. The Carolina matchup should be solid, especially if J.C. Horn's going to be a little bit banged up here. There could be a possibility that he could miss. But for right now, I'd lean towards Mike Evans. I just understand, though, in a half PPR, like we've talked about earlier and over the course of the season, James Conner has been 13-plus fantasy points 80+% of the time. So he'll probably score 13 fantasy points in a half PPR, base minimum. Mike Evans, I just think he is certainly more capable of, in my opinion, against Carolina, of producing more. All right, Frosty says, I would recommend, okay, he's talking to somebody else, never mind. Patrick 510 says, full PPR, I have Tillman, Odunze, and Tracy in my lineup. Should I drop anyone for a receiver like Vele, Addison? Oh yeah, Addison, if he's available, I mean, again, he's scored a touchdown in 3 of the last 4 games here. Taking on, this week's matchup, I would absolutely be willing to pick up Addison and play him. So yeah, in your position, considering Tillman's most likely going to miss, considering the concussion protocol here, Patrick 510, Addison's someone that I'd absolutely want to pick up and potentially play here. Joseph Weintraub says, Andrew, appreciate your advice. Rest of season, which wide receivers? Says, rest of season, pick 3 wide receivers. Pickens, Wilson, Neighbors, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. Got it. Of the available for the remainder of the season, I'd probably go like Pickens, Jackson Smith, and then I'd go like, I don't know what Dayball's overall situation is typically with like the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Neighbors obviously made some noise in the locker room after the game in terms of complaining about the overall opportunity share that he got. I don't know if he's going to be given the ample opportunity going forward because of his complaints. We'll have to wait and see. But for right now, I'll lean towards Pickens, Jackson Smith, and Wilson as the 1 to 3, and the Neighbors will be number 4. Especially if that quarterback situation is not going to get resolved and or they're not going to let Drew Lock, get a couple opportunities here going forward. Josh Holt says, sorry for the confusion. Taylor is my flex. Otten is my tight end. Oh, I understand now. Would you start Debo over Taylor? Probably. Well, if Purdy plays, yes, I would. If Purdy plays, though. If Purdy's not going to play, then the decision is made for you in that circumstance. My other wide receivers are Pickens and Reed. What is that question in regards to? Oh, there it is. Half PPR, 2 separate deals. I'm looking to make a trade away Connor and Andrews for Kupp and Kittle. Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love that. Trade away Garrett Wilson and Pittman for JSN and Bucky. Dude, both those trades in my mind are actually W's. I'll take both of them, to be totally honest. I'm not even joking there. TF sends it a question, says bench 1, PPR, Drake, T, Evans, Kupp, or Bucky. This is too early to ask me. I haven't even looked at wide receiver potential for this weekend in terms of breaking it down. So as of right now, if I was to give you an answer, I'm benching Evans out of all those options. I'd rather play Drake, London, T. Higgins, Kupp, and Bucky ahead of him. But that's only as of right now. By the time we get to Thursday, it could change, TF, but I think it probably won't. Those other options are just stellar. Jason says, greetings and salutations, Andrew. Pick one quarterback for week 13 out of Kyler, Tua, or Knicks. In regards to week 13 matchups, Tua versus Green Bay on Thursday is not a bad one, especially if we're going to get a situation in which, what's his name? Jair Alexander is going to miss another consecutive game. That'll be very promising in that circumstance. But Bo Nix versus Cleveland, or do I want to play... Do I want to play Kyler versus Minnesota? Not really. I mean, honestly, I'd probably stick with Tua. I'm not even joking. That's what I would do. I'd play Tua. I don't know if Tua has like a terrible record on primetime television. I mean, the only other times that we've seen him on primetime, he is shoving his helmet into someone's chest to get concussions. But as of right now, Tua's just been incredible. And I don't think he's slowing down. So I think I'd probably go in that direction. Let's see here. Onage says PPR keep 2 rest of season. McBride, Otten, or Taysom. I'd keep McBride and Taysom. That's the way I go about it. Because again, you're going to play McBride every game henceforth. So you'd only ever use Taysom if you're like, hey, listen, there's a possibility he scores 2 touchdowns this game because they've got a really good matchup against X, Y, or Z defense. And then you throw him in at your flex. You wouldn't even start him at tight end. Let's see here. And you also want to make sure that nobody else in your league can get him because he has the game-breaking ability where if he starts against you in the fantasy playoffs and he puts up that 30-point game, it's over. And you're just going to cry about it. It's just going to be a disaster. All right, let's see what we have in the chat. We took a look at that. Flo says, drop MVS and Spears for Gus Edwards and a good defense. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you're preparing for the fantasy playoffs, not a bad idea. Deshaun in the chat says, full PPR. I was thinking of trading Baker Mayfield for Nico Collins. Beautiful. I don't have no issue with that at all. I have Jalen Hurts. Beautiful. And I believe the rest of the season is favorable match. Yeah, outside of Pittsburgh. Honestly, I would say that because of the rushing ability of Jalen Hurts, he has no bad matchups. Because in any given play, there can be a pass down the field that leads to either a completion or a penalty, defensive pass interference. Then they're on the 1 yard line. Boom, he punches in for 6 points. He could do that every single week. We talked about it the most recent weeks. Like in the last 5 games, he's averaging like 14 points per game just off of rushing statistics, rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. So regardless of what a defense has in terms of their passing or their pass game, stop it. Well, I don't even know. My English is cooked. In terms of their pass stopping ability, regardless of what that looks like, because of his rushing upside, he's just always an auto start, Gina in the chat says, what about Chuba Hubbard as a backup for JK? And I have Reed, Metcalf, MVS, Tillman, Coleman, QT. Should I trade one for McConkey? What do you think? I mean, look, in terms of Chuba Hubbard being a backup for J.K. Dobbins, Chuba Hubbard is a better running back than J.K. Dobbins. So if you have Chuba Hubbard, you're good to go rest of the season. Does he have some difficult, games up ahead? Absolutely, but he's still been able to be relevant regardless of that. Luckily, because he got down to the 1 yard line. Speaking of a defensive pass interference that gets him to the 1, punches it in the next play, beautiful. But in the case of going forward, yeah, I mean, in the absence of J.K. Dobbins, Chuba Hubbard is a fantastic option. Considering you have Reed, Metcalf, MVS, Tillman, Coleman, and QT at this point, yeah, I'd like to trade for McConkey. If you can get McConkey and you don't have to give up too much. Like specifically, I don't want to give away Reed or Metcalf. As long as you can give away any of those other players, I'd be willing to do it. Kamikaze says, I need help with my lineup. I have Hurts, Chase, Neighbors, Jacobs, Tracy, Ladd, Stevenson, Dowdle, Coleman, Goddard, and Kincaid in a half PPR, 2 wide receiver, 2 running back, 1 tight end, 1 flex. Who do I start? I mean, as of this week, I think it's auto started. Like your team is structured in a way in which it has to just be played in this specific manner. Jalen Hurts has to start. Jamar Chase has to start. Neighbors has to start. Jacobs has to start. Tracy has to start. And Ladd McConkey is in your flex. So that's really it. Stevenson, I'd love to play him, but he's coming off of a week in which he was out-snapped by Gibson. He played 42% of the snaps. Gibson played 43%. And there was no opportunity for Ramondre Stevenson. He is purely dependent on game script. If they are not in a positive script or one in which they are in a close contest, they are getting completely fried. So in this circumstance, based on how Ladd McConkey's played as of late, I'd probably just lean towards playing him in the flex and playing it safe. As for Goddard and Kincaid, I'd have to see a full week of practice from Kincaid for me to feel comfortable rolling him. Otherwise, I'm going Goddard. Thank you. Shrey says, does Roshan have any dynasty upside? Thinking to trade for him for a third. I mean, look, as of right now, the coaching staff of the Chicago Bears, we should expect them to all be fired by the end of the season. We should not expect for Eberflus and the crew to make it. And maybe we shouldn't even expect the GM to make it past this offseason. So in the event in which that happens and we get a new coaching regime within the organization, I would anticipate that typically what happens is a new coaching regime will come in. Because Roshan Johnson is on a rookie deal, there is no priority given to him. He would have to earn the job just like anybody else within the new regime. And if the overall scheme specifically propels another running back to take over that goal line opportunity share for a dynasty going forward, again, on a rookie deal with no coaching kind of reliance, it's going to be tough. Like he could end up being a Chuba Hubbard of the future, but that's something that would happen multiple years down the line, in which it requires a lot of forethought and foresight of luck to transpire. But as of right now, do I love the idea of trading a third for him? Not really. Again, because it's so difficult to predict what that offense is going to look like and what the coaching staff is going to be. Who's going to be the new head coach? Who's going to be the new offensive coordinator? What kind of offense are they going to try to run in Chicago, etc. And will he be implicated to even be on the team in a couple years from now? Let's see here. Trade Mixon for, what was that, for Bucky for the playoffs? No, I'd rather have Mixon. Absolutely rather have Mixon. I know he's coming off a pretty lackluster performance here on Sunday, but that's the one bad game he's had all season, so I'm not really worried about Mixon. Jesse Jimenez says, I got Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, and Bucky Irving. My other running backs are Jacobs. Who would you start in the flex? And one running back slot. Yeah, Bucky Irving plays in the other running back spot, and Aaron Jones sits in the flex. So you're starting both the running backs this week. Aaron Jones and Bucky Irving are your suggestions from me, Jesse. Thank you. Let's see here. Flo says in a full point PPR, I have Ertz. Okay, a tight end for week 14. Any recommendations as to who you would pick up via waiver wire? I could use rest of the season. Yeah, look, as of right now for week 14 waiver wire tight end pickup in place, it's obviously going to be very much determined on like who's healthy at the time. But looking at the entire board as it stands, probably the best case scenario is maybe someone like Theo Johnson. Perhaps maybe Juwan Johnson from the Saints. Depending on whether Jatavion Sanders is even healthy. Obviously, he went to the hospital yesterday, so I wouldn't assume that he's going to play in that week. Maybe Chigoziem Okonkwo could work there. Yeah, there's just not a lot of potential depth across the entire field at tight end. I think your best case scenario, and I'm not even exaggerating here, might just be Noah Gray. Like it might actually be a Noah Gray week 14 Chiefs versus Chargers play. Or otherwise, again, it's Theo Johnson. Guys that I've mentioned via waiver wire the last couple weeks here. Steve in the chat says, hi Andrew, should I drop Benson or New York defense for Bigsby? Benson or New York defense. I have Gibbs and HN. I have no issue at all dropping. Okay, so when you say New York defense, why do you have New York defense? Yeah, I'm dropping them. I have no interest in keeping them on roster. Yeah, I'd swap that out. Let's see here. Ando says, rest of season, Arizona or Philly defense? I'd like to just keep Philly there. Philly's been fantastic defensively across the season, right? So I just don't see why you would need to replace them. Yeah, they've been solid across the board here. Their fantasy playoff schedule, again, Pittsburgh, which I think they will shut down, Pittsburgh's offense. I think they'll also shut down Washington again, which they did a couple weeks ago. And then they have Dallas week 17. Yeah, I don't have an issue keeping them on roster. Now, again, if you're just looking for specifically week 15 and 16, because you're like, I just need to win the first 2 weeks, I don't have a first round bye, I'd say that technically, yes, there are more favorable matchups in the case of Arizona, to where if you're like, listen, I'm just purely preparing for those 2 weeks, I got to try to win them, then Arizona would be the preference. But if you're just like, hey, I got to just roll a defense from now until the end of the season, I'd rather just have it, Philly on roster. Keep him as is. Let's see here. Real Franklin, what's up, Franklin? Says, Andrew, hope you're doing well. I am doing well. Thank you very much, Franklin. Appreciate it. Let's see here. Nick L says, I love my team, but they're 6-6 now. Week 13, Stroud, Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey, Drake, JJ. Yeah, look, you are in a very interesting sequence here, Nick. Considering Christian McCaffrey and JJ were no-shows this most recent week, we're going to hope that they have some bounce-back performances here, certainly. Am I making any changes to this roster in terms of starting options? Benching Higgins in any given week makes me sick to my stomach. But I mean, again, when I look at your roster across the board, Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey, Chase Brown, JJ Drake, you just got too many studs. Maybe you're trading somebody to get a better quarterback than Stroud. That's the way that I'd go about it, Nick. Flo says, I know everyone's on the Bucky train, but Rashad has 6 touchdowns in the last 5 games. You're not wrong, Flo. Again, I'm trying to remember. Was it 2 weeks ago? Everybody asked me like 2 weeks ago because their trade deadline was upon them. I think it was week 11. It was week 11 because that's when I did the rest of season strength schedule. I told you guys, I want rest of season James Conner, Bucky Irving, Rashad White, and Tracy. That's what I wanted. Those are the 4 affordable running backs that we were able to trade for. And the reason why I specifically said those names is because they were on bye week and you were able to trade for them and get the discount because people were like, oh, I don't have a running back to play this week. That's why we went after those guys. So yeah, if you were able to get any of them in the future, it's going to pay dividends. I can assure you this. Angel says, Mikey, he did them in the video last week. Andrew, make sure to get plenty of rest. We need your healthy for the playoffs. Listen, last year for the playoffs, your boy went to a Christmas party and got sick, and it was one of the worst week 16s of my life. Let me tell you that much. I will not be doing that this year. I will stay hunkered down in the fort and make sure that I don't get sick. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see here. Okay, Jay says, happy birthday. Thanks, Jay. Says PPR pick 3, Brees Hall, Jacobs, Chuba Hubbard, Puka Nacua, Mike Evans. I mean, look, at this point, Josh Jacobs has to play. Puka Nacua has to play. So everything else is just a matter of how do we want to approach this? Hall, Chuba Hubbard, or Mike Evans. Between the three, I'm going to play Brees Hall with them. So I'd go Jacobs, Hall, and Nacua. X Factor says, hey, Andrew, thank you for the Jonnu Smith over Jennings call. Saved my week. No problem. I mean, I'm glad it helped. I'm sure I told somebody else to do the opposite at one point this week. But if I told you that on Sunday morning, I'm glad that I was able to help you. Frosty's talking to somebody else. Patrick says, I have Zach Ertz. We'll need a tight end for week 14. I mean, again, you want to keep Zach Ertz on your team, Patrick. But for week 14, again, if you're going to pick up somebody, I'd assume that like Noah Gray and unless you have a list of players, I'm assuming Noah Gray and Theo Johnson are the best availables in that overall circumstance. Charlene, what's up? Says, hey, Andrew. The one thing I've noticed about the Lions is that if opponents' defenses stop the run, they will throw the ball. If opponents' defenses stop throws, the Lions will run the ball. Thank you, Charlene. That is such insightful evidence that I cannot actually... We need to get you... You know what? I'll be sending you an email. We'll get you on the payroll very soon enough based on your analytical data there. I greatly appreciate that. Charlene, you're the best. Thank you. Let's see here. YT says... Those underdog picks hit good. Yeah, thank goodness, man. It took me so long. For the last 3 weeks, the Monday game has clipped me every single time out. The week prior was Nico Collins that screwed me. The week prior to that was Kyron Williams who screwed me. And luckily this week, we had a little bit of success. Frosty's talking to somebody else. That happens so often. Yeah, dude, I appreciate it, Frosty. You're always in here answering other people's questions, and that is very much so appreciated. Your contributions are not overlooked, and they're definitely appreciated by me. Kamikaze says Adams or Devontae this week? Like Devontae Smith? Against the Ravens, if Devontae Smith gets a full healthy sequence of practices, I would say yes, let's do that. Otherwise, it's probably going to have to be Devontae Adams. Wheezy says, should I hold on to the Bills rest of the season? For week 15 in the playoffs, I think the Bills take on, if I'm not mistaken, the Lions. Let me confirm this. NFL week 15. I don't want to play them against the Lions in week 15. I'd like them in week 16 against the Patriots, but week 15 does not seem like a great circumstance here. Yeah, they play against... Yeah, so the Rams in week 14 is fine. The 49ers this week, if Brandon Allen's playing quarterback, is fine. But in the long term... Don't want them for week 15. Unless you're in a situation you're like, Andrew, I got a first round bye. I'm a stud. I got this locked in, brother. Then at that case, yeah, let's just hold on to them for the fantasy playoffs. Week 16 and 17. Jay in the chat says, would you trade JJ for Neighbors and Jacoby? No, I would not. I'd keep JJ. It's one bad week. I'm not worried about it. John War says questions in the chat. Thank you, John. Says PPR, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, and 2 flex. We traded Justin Jefferson for Bijan. No problem with that. It's pretty good equivalent value. Burrow/Herbert are my quarterbacks. Okay, so basically Burrow is your quarterback going forward is what I'm hearing. Running backs are Saquon, Bijan. Okay, those are your 2 starters. Wide receivers are Puka, Marvin Harrison, Higgins. So basically, and Sutton. So Puka and Sutton are your starting 1 and 2. And you're pretty much flexing Higgins going forward. Should I drop some depth picks for handcuffs at running back? I mean, at this point, no. Look, here's the thing. The talent that you have on roster right now, John War, is so potent that a handcuff is not going to be more valuable than just putting in, Tracy or Najee Harris in the event in which Saquon goes down. If Saquon goes down, I'm not playing Kenneth Walker over a Tyrone Tracy, right? So in this circumstance, based on what you have, I keep it as is. You're solid. Braden says, Andrew, would you rather have Kamara or Henry for the fantasy playoffs? Okay, so here's the issue. Kamara has the back pocket dealings of the one and only Taysom Hill. I don't know what the offense is going to comprise of or look like by the time we get to the fantasy playoffs, but I'm going to assume Taysom's still going to be highly implemented, whether it's within the receiving game or as a primary rusher near the goal line. So in that event, I would rather have Derrick Henry going forward here. What does it say? I have 3 tight ends. I have Otten, Hawkinson, and Andrews, 10 team. What should I do? I mean, keep them all. You've got 3 good tight ends, brother. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Donald says, I barely won tonight. Congratulations, Donald. Glad to hear it. I needed 14 from Herbert. Yeah, listen, the rushing touchdown was very helpful. Getting the 2 extra points for that touchdown, I'm sure was the biggest difference maker there, Donald. Matt Glore says, how stupid am I for trading 4 weeks ago JSN at projected 1.06 for Marvin Harrison in the dime? I mean, I think time will tell. Look, listen, here's the thing. As it currently stands, the offense, the way that it's constructed in Arizona is not very much so, hey, we have to get this man the ball. Obviously, the offensive coordinator is a former tight ends coach. That is why Trey McBride is the #1 target option in terms of total targets, receptions, receiving yards this season for the offense. We thought that they would change once they made that draft pick. They didn't. And we'll learn from that going into the future. Matt Glore, did we take care of your question? I thought we did. Oh, yeah, that was your question. Okay, cool. Thank you. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a stupid move. Again, JSN, we'll see what the offense looks like going forward. Obviously, the Seattle Seahawks need a quarterback for the future. As to who that is going to be, I don't think it's going to be Geno going forward. I'm sure they're going to draft one upcoming here, and we'll see how that kind of entire thing transpires. But yeah, JSN looked great as of late when given opportunity. That's just the fact of the matter. Opportunity leads to success. I'm waiting for Kyler to stop putting in so many hours in Call of Duty and maybe locking it in with Marvin Harrison so we can actually get some production. Ed sends in a question, says Taylor or Tracy. As for this week in specific, I'd rather, well, you know what? Those are actually a really good question. Oh man, that is a really good question. I don't know the answer, Ed. I'll know by tomorrow when I put out my top 36 running back rankings. As of right now, I don't know if I'm going to play Taylor over Tracy or vice versa, because the Cowboys can't stop the run either. For right now, I'm going to say that I'm most likely going to have Taylor ranked ahead of him, though. Mahomes or Herbert. As for this upcoming week, I think it's too difficult not to play Mahomes. I think he's been playing very well. Do I want to play Herbert? No. Scratch that. Go back. Everybody forget I just said that. Herbert plays against Atlanta. Atlanta's a joke of a defense. Fire up Herbert. Thank you. Oh, this is a rest of season question. And then also for rest of season. Rest of season is going to be very much so matchup dependent. I couldn't tell you objectively every week from henceforth. We'll have to wait and see. Somebody said Algier or Singletary. I'd rather have Algier on roster if I was going to have one of the two. But if I'm starting one of the two this week, I'd rather start Singletary. Anonymous sends in a question. Thank you, Anonymous. Where is your question, though? Anonymous says, thoughts on Otten after an off game? I mean, again, if they're going to continue... Look, think about it this way. The offense scored 4 rushing touchdowns with 4 different players. Baker, Sean Tucker, Bucky, and Rachaad White all scored rushing touchdowns. So down near the goal line, it was a run-heavy approach. And quite frankly, in terms of the overall attempts on the game, a run-heavy approach because they were leading so early on. Going forward, when they get into games in which it will be a potential shootout, the only game in which I can foresee that potentially being the case, again, there's a possibility that maybe, and we're hoping that is going to be the case, that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers match up this week against Carolina. Maybe Carolina's offense has looked great as of late, can step up. But against the Raiders, it's going to be a one-sided affair. Against the Los Angeles Chargers, that should be a back-and-forth one, so maybe we can start Otten there. Against Dallas, one-sided affair. Carolina, we'll have to wait and see. But again, 2 of the next 5 games against Carolina, if that becomes a run-first approach in a barrel-down game, the upside will be capped. Let's see here. John Fries says, what do you think about Jaden Daniels' rest of season? Should I be trying to find a new quarterback or hold Daniels? If I look at the Commanders' schedule up ahead, I mean, are we specifically, because he has a week 14 bye. You are aware of that, I'm sure. If you're specifically talking about the fantasy playoff schedule, New Orleans, I think, is a great matchup week 15. Week 16 against Philadelphia, very much so concerning, especially from what we most recently saw out of Daniels. But there's a couple instances in that game that I'm sure he wants a couple plays back that could have been made, that could have made a huge difference. Then week 17 against Atlanta. Again, Atlanta cannot stop a soul. They can't stop opposing quarterbacks. They're a top 5 matchup. So New Orleans and Atlanta, fantastic. Philly in week 16, that is the only one that which I would potentially consider an alternative starting quarterback option. But again, depends. Like, am I going to take Derek Carr and play him in week 16 when it's all on the line, or am I going to play Jaden Daniels? I'm going to play Jaden Daniels, right? It's going to be it's going to be a tough situation in which I'm benching him in any circumstance there. And even in a tough matchup, it would be difficult for me to swallow that. It's going to be one of those tough pills that I don't think I'm willing to go down with the ship with. I'll just let, Jaden Daniels, who got me to the fantasy playoffs, to lead me to the championship, or take me home. Hey, Andrew, what does it say, Angel? It says, what is a good replacement than Moody? Sanders or Bass? It depends on weather. Again, my immediate suggestion to you, Angel, I think is both are great options going forward. I would legitimately tell you right now, go look at both of their schedules. Whoever has more games indoors or in a stadium which there's going to be no implicated weather, that would be the one that I prefer. Because again, if Tyler Bass is going to be in snow games or rain games in Buffalo in comparison to Sanders, who may have home games in Miami where there's no weather concerns, or they're going to have games indoor stadiums, if they're going to have those kind of instances, I want to have the kicker going forward off the top of my head that is not going to have weather concerns, accompanying their potential performances ahead. Got it? Cool. All right, guys. I think that's what we're going to call it. I appreciate y'all. Kamikaze says Hubbard or Bucky this week. As of right now, I'm playing Bucky everywhere I have him, and at a point to where, like, you'll see by tomorrow morning's rankings, or tomorrow afternoon's rankings, my apologies, he's going to be pretty highly ranked. He's going to be in the top 12. So either way, both are fantastic plays. I don't think there's a wrong answer. I really like the idea of playing Bucky, especially against Carolina. Okay, guys, that's where I'm going to call it. I appreciate y'all coming through, supporting the channel. I'll be back tomorrow in regards to, of course, the top 36 running back rankings. On top of it, tomorrow night, starting at 7 p.m. PST, like we do every single night, we'll live stream here on the channel. But Wednesday, wide receivers, live stream at night. And then Thursday morning, starting at either 6:30 or 7 a.m. PST, I'll have an indicator by probably Wednesday as to what time we're going to start. It's either going to be a 3 or 2.5 hour live stream prior to the Thursday slate of games. We'll have live stream in the morning. We'll answer questions at 2 to 3 hours there, and then we'll get everybody ready to go. Friday, we'll do the same thing, live streaming before the game for a couple hours. Saturday, live stream for starter sit questions. Sunday morning, live stream. And then we're back to the top of the board, week 14, with the Bipocalypse on that next Monday. So that's the schedule up ahead. I appreciate y'all. Much love. I'll get onto the overall asking of why the heck Derrick Henry, did his overall play on Underdog get saved yet? Because I don't understand why it wouldn't. I didn't read anything within the vulture protection that speaks to me that it shouldn't get saved. So I'll dig into that. I'll figure out what the reason was. And if it needs to be changed, I'll contact somebody and see if we can change that. Otherwise, we're good to go. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Somebody said Moody or Seibert. I'd rather have Seibert. But again, that's only if there's no Brock Purdy. If Brock Purdy's going to play, I'd like to have Moody. They'll have more chances of scoring, and they'll be fantastic going forward. Otherwise, Seibert in the short term should be solid in terms of this week, but then next week you're on a bye, so then you're immediately picking up somebody else. But if the Purdy news tomorrow continues to progress in a positive kind of direction, if it's not like a labral tear, if he tore his labrum, we are screwed. Like, he's out for the season type stuff. So we're going to have to wait and see. All right, guys, I appreciate y'all. What did it say? It says maybe Lamar's vulture was like 10.5 yards. No, but it says a 10-yard rushing touchdown. So there's no 0.5 in the books. That's the issue. There's no half numbers in the NFL. You're not on the half-yard line. You don't get 11.5 rushing yard attempts, right? Anyway, I appreciate y'all. Much love. I'm cueing the music. Have a great rest of your Sorry, it's Monday night. It's almost Tuesday. Perhaps you're from the East Coast. It's a Tuesday morning. Good morning. I'll see you guys. Peace.